Aw, yeah. Let's get this party started up in here. Whoop, whoop. Hey, this is Mark. You're listening to this show probably on your mobile device, whether it's iOS or Android or even Windows Mobile. Who has one of those? But anyway, you're probably listening whether it's iTunes or Stitcher or some other wonderful mobile app that brings this amazingly awesome show to your ear holes. Yeah, but did you also know that you can find this show among several others in this category at the Tangent Bound Network? That's right, go visit tangentboundnetwork.com, check it out, where you can always get the latest episode of this and other shows quite like it. Although, admittedly, there is no show quite like this one.
Hello, everybody. This is the MLBeers podcast with your hosts Andrew Sherman and Phillip Corwin. Phillip, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent today. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing pretty well. It is kind of a good week for us. Both of our teams are facing each other.
I guess it's a good week for you.
Yeah, that's true. Which I'm still surprised by what's been going on. I'm happy but surprised.
Yeah, there's no way that going into this I-70 series where the Royals would lose 2 games in a row at Kauffman by giving up double-digit runs.
Yeah, that was kind of like I said, I was surprised that it was happening because, going into the week we were just, meddling 500 from the break. We just got a nice win from the Reds the day before the series started, but before that, it was still, we were having either bullpen problems or we couldn't get runs or pitching, starting pitching had problems or there was injuries here and there. I mean, hell, for the Cardinals, Stephen Piscotty was optioned down to AAA, which I'll get, I will talk about that later on in the show.
You look at the Royals, it looks like Salvador Perez is going to be on the DL for about 4 weeks.
Ooh. Yeah, I think.
So we lost one of our, top offensive production. And the last 2 games, the starting pitching has just struggled. Mm-hmm. And finally, Ned Yost has decided that it is time to finally sit Alex Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the only reason why he's sitting Alex Gordon now is because Perez is on the DH. And you can't, on the DH, the DL.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have 3 guys in your lineup that will hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Because Butera, he's a good backup catcher, but he's a backup catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Moss and Alex Gordon in the lineup with Butera just can't happen. And I think that was kind of the final straw.
Yeah,
but
watching. Did you watch any of the game last night?
I watched some of it until it just got out of hand in that 6-run inning.
Yeah, there's been. I'm pretty sure it was like the 4th inning that happened. That's been kind of the sweet spot for the Cardinals because
it was the 5th inning.
5th inning.
Yeah, because the Royals scored 3 innings in the inning before in the 4th,
mm-hmm.
so it was 3-1,
mm-hmm.
and steady lead. And then 5th inning, Jason Vargas gets beat up, and he's been the consistent starting pitcher for the Royals.
Mm-hmm.
He lets up 6 runs. Mike Minor lets up 1. Feliz lets up 3 more. So
mm-hmm.
it just kind of all went downhill.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, you can obviously tell not having your all-star catcher not being there is a difference maker.
But there is a little bit of hope. Chester Cuthbert came back last night, and he hit that 3-run double first time back after his rehab stint.
Mm-hmm.
So could it be worked out where the lineup looks something like Moustakas at DH, Cuthbert at 3rd, Milky in left, and Bonifacio in right, and Moss and Gordon aren't in the everyday lineup?
I mean, it's time will tell, but definitely,
because Cuthbert stepped up last year
mm-hmm.
and was able to fill in for Mike Moustakas very well last year.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull up Cuthbert's stuff from last year.
Okay. But I was just going to say real quick before you give me his lines. It was just that, it will, time will tell if that will work. Of course, Cuthbert coming back from an injury, even though he had a rehab stint, so he's, almost or optimal to what he needs to be for the majors. And I think it might be a good thing. I think a little bit of change doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Especially since, the Cardinals have been going through changes since pretty much week 2 of the season. I mean, yesterday I saw on Twitter, I believe it was Viva Alberto's, they tweeted out that they tweeted out stats which was from day 1 to now, from opening day starters and the opening day starters that are on the DL have only hit 64 home runs.
Oh, jeez.
Then it showed how many home runs guys that have came up from the minors to the majors have made, and I believe it was like 67. And there's only been 5 guys, position player wise, that have been up through the the minor leagues into the everyday roster, and it's just ridiculous how the power surge from the minor league system, well, from AAA I should say, has done so well for them. And
yeah,
I mean
that's a positive.
It's a positive, but also a negative.
Oh, yeah, because you weren't expecting those guys to have to produce for you this year.
Yeah, I'm maybe 1 or 2, but 5 is kind of, a little bit overboard. But, I mean, there's been injuries, and then there's been wonky, we're going to send this guy down to single A, talk to the hitting guru of the team, and try to find a swing back, a.k.a. Randall Grichuk, which I'm still confused, still puzzled. That's the word. I'm still puzzled about it when it happened, because it was like, he went to single A and he's not injured?
Right.
Like a couple of years back, getting back to your Royals, when Mike Moustakas had his problems, he just went to AAA and started crushing the ball
and figured it out.
Yeah, but then it's just weird that it's, oh yeah, we're gonna have a guy get sent down to single A. It's not triple or double, it's single A ball, just to figure out his swings and learn how to be patient.
Right. But speaking of Cuthbert,
Mm-hmm.
Last year when he filled in for Moustakas when he tore his ACL, in 128 games, 510 plate appearances, 12 home runs, 18.8% strikeout rate, 320 batting average balls in play, 274 average, 318 on base, 413 slugging, 316 WOBA, and a 94 WRC plus.
Not bad numbers. Not bad numbers at all.
This year, he went on the DL back in June.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, before he went, he was hitting 208.
Mm-hmm.
But he hurt his wrist in spring training.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of kept playing through it.
Mm-hmm.
And he only played 33 games until last night.
33 games and then getting injured. But, I mean, now it's, this is his opportunity to really shine for
Oh, yeah, because if he
Royals
can come up, like I said, and play good defense, because Moustakas has been battling fluid in his knee since he got hit by Rondon
mm-hmm.
when the Royals were blowing out the Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
I've heard about it, but I didn't really see it.
So essentially, the Royals were beating the Tigers like 16 to something, and the pitch before it was 13 to something,
mm-hmm.
and Mike Moustakas hit a 3-run double.
Mm-hmm.
Very next pitch, Bruce Rondon hits Mike Moustakas on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, why you got to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And the bench is cleared. There's some fighting and nonsense.
Yay.
But, yeah.
Good old baseball fights.
God, baseball fights. They used to be better.
Yeah, until Bryce Harper wanted to throw a helmet, caddy,
But no.
Caddy corner away from Hunter Strickland. But
Yes. But if Cuthbert can come up and produce for these, there's about 60 or so games left.
Mm-hmm.
That lineup would not be bad by leaving Butera in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get Perez back, just subtract Butera, and if Cuthbert is still playing well, you got guys on your bench that are Brandon Moss and Alex Gordon
Mm-hmm.
that could be good situational hitters.
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility.
And it'd be different if Cuthbert didn't have the year he did last year.
Mm-hmm.
But that was his first full year in the league, and he hit 274.
So it also
And
it leaves improvement.
And I looked through his minor league average. His minor league average was just about 281. So he's always been that kind of hitter. He just good enough.
Mm-hmm. No, and of course, nothing wrong with that. So
No, nothing wrong with being average, especially in baseball.
Yeah, because that gets you the money.
Yeah,
even though it's not Bryce Harper money, it still gets you the money.
Well, look what kind of money Alex Gordon got for being a 264 hitter.
That was all defense. That money was all defense.
Yeah.
We know it. You know it. You specifically know it more than I do.
Yeah.
But it's just like, that was more of defense than anything else.
Yeah. He had 1 year where he hit 290.
Difficult.
Yeah. But no, if Cuthbert can come in and produce, and if Mike Moustakas can just stay healthy and play DH, and which would probably be better for his knee to begin with,
mm-hmm.
then I'll take it.
Yeah, and I think that will be good for the Royals. But enough about our I-70, our teams, the I-70 series. Let's get down to business a little bit. Today, for this show, we're going to be talking about the AL Wild Card and the NL Central, which are pretty much the only two races left in this season. And we'll talk about if that's kind of a good or bad thing to only have two races out of the possible 8. So, and I feel indifferent, but of course we can talk about that later. But first of all, we talked about this last week. We talked about August trades and how ridiculous they can be. And there's been some news of some players being traded. Of course, the first one was kind of a shocker, but also, I guess, kind of necessary in a way for one team to be in contention. Yonder Alonso from his former club, the Athletics, went to the Mariners for outfielder Boog Powell, which, interestingly enough, I think was a good idea for the Mariners to get a guy that could hit the ball. Definitely a first baseman / DH type of guy. And if you look at his numbers real quick, when I get them up, even though he has a 365, that on base percentage of 367 and a 522 slugging percentage, pretty good. Also, the nice 22 home runs helps a lot. Also, he has a 300 BABIP. He has a isolated power number of 256, and his K rate isn't ridiculously high like Chris Davis, which we'll talk about him in a moment, but he has a 23.7 K strikeout percentage. I don't know why I'm overthinking, but I just did there.
But
I was like, are you looking at the stats?
Yeah, I was looking at the stats, and then I got tongue-tied.
Yeah, it's okay. It's still early. It's a little bit early. It's about August trades, and that's how, like we talked about last week.
That's about how well they go.
that's how well they go and how everything, like, I'm not going to get back to what we talked about from last week, but it's just how it all goes down is still confusing in a way. I even talked about that at work at my baseball job the other day, and I explained to the best of my abilities of what the August trade waiver system works, and the guy was like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Like, the biggest name on that list right now is Bryce Harper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Yonder
and
Alonso.
Bryce Harper won't get claimed or traded.
Yeah, like Yonder Alonso was actually a trade. But then you have, like I brought up Chris Davis and you bring up Bryce Harper, those guys were on the waiver wire and didn't even know what, I mean, it was just like, really? They were on the waiver, up for waivers, but nobody claimed them because, of course, of how everything goes down and all that stuff. And I'm still confused in a sense. I mean, even though
really the only name I could really be seeing traded off that list right now that's cleared waivers, that's the biggest rumor that's still going on, is Justin Verlander.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just, that's all I was going to say. It's just like, that's the guy that's been linked the most to the Astros right now.
Mm-hmm. And
none of the other names are really being linked to anybody, because when you trade them in August, most of these teams want the other team to take on the rest of their contract.
Yeah, and
that's the point of the waivers, because if you claim them off waivers, you pick up the rest of their contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why a bunch of these guys are just put on there to see if there's any interest, and most of the time there's not.
Yeah, I was about to say, and it's all about fishing. Seeing who's interested in who and all that stuff. And
especially if there's a team mid-August in the hunt of a run, like maybe the Brewers, who want to make the playoffs this year and kind of make a splash, that's the time you might see a big name come off the board, like a Cespedes or maybe a Chris Davis if the Orioles continue to play badly.
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's not a whole lot of, like you said, it's fishing. It's seeing if there's any interest, because you can gauge that interest now, and then when winter and the offseason rolls around, you remember the interest of a set player, and you can re-engage those talks in the winter when you can trade freely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, it's kind of used, in a way to see, like you said, to see who's interested, and if somebody's, somebody needs to renegotiate their contracts or whatever, just like you said, the player could also be like, yeah, this team was interested in me. I want a little more from you to keep, still have my services, while I can go for this team for somewhat of a lesser price, because they still want me and all that stuff. But you guys gotta, even though there's that that so-called home, isn't it like hometown, the hometown price or whatever?
Yeah.
Where it's just the hometown discount, that's what it is. Where supposedly it's a little bit less to stay at the team that you're currently at, but, some players are greedy. Some players want the money, and they'll go wherever the cash flows, per se. And we were talking about this before we got on, but just how ridiculous this waiver list is, not what we have, or not what we have up for us, but just how secretive this is. Reading some of the articles and, trying to do my own research to find, this said waiver list.
It took me 3 links to find it, because I just typed in August MLB players recoverable waivers, and it brought up links from 14, 15, and 16 before I found the 17's list.
But
granted, that sounds like a first world problem.
Yeah, but that list that you found, which is through the MLB trade rumors, right?
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like it gives a full list though, because it gives out the big names: Bryce Harper, Joey Votto was on the list, Justin Upton, Jay Bruce, Giannis Cespedes, Neil Walker, Brandon Crawford, Chris Davis, yada yada yada, and even Justin Verlander. But like reading through the comments through that article, it just seemed like this is kind of a half-assed list of a complete list. You know, it got the main guys.
And
Don't
that's
get
really
me wrong.
And that's really all we're kind of concerned about, because the guys that are passing through now that aren't the big names, again, you won't see very many trades in August.
Yeah,
we've seen 5.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen 5 in 9 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it will get even colder after today.
Yeah, and you know, if you follow MLB trade rumors on Twitter, for you folks out there, you will actually get more of a minor league transaction trade list,
yes,
than the August waiver wire. And of course, if you want to research this yourselves, folks, don't look up waiver wire, because then it will think you're talking about fantasy baseball and yada yada yada, and it just leads you down the wrong path. But it was just like, this is how secretive this list is, though, because we had to go through a subsidiary pretty much with MLB trade rumors and, you know, read their article of who's been on this waiver list, even though the list could be, you know, could be 2 pages long, 3 pages long, all that stuff. We were just lucky to find, well, Phil was lucky to find, and also myself, we were just lucky to find that MLB trade rumors kind of cut through the BS and got the guys that we wanted. You know, that was just the luck of the draw. We're not expecting MLB trade rumors to have everything we want right then and there, but it was just the luck of the draw. This happened.
Yeah, that's really about it, though.
Yeah, and I mean, there will probably be more mid to lower tier trades in the future. I mean,
minor league trades,
league trades, of course, but player wise in the MLB, another one was Sean Rodriguez. He was with the Braves earlier this year.
Traded back to the Pirates,
which he was part of the 2016 team. But now
George Contos went to the Giants, back to the Padres, from the Giants to the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
We already talked about Alonso.
Mm-hmm.
Mariners did beef up on their pitching and got Ryan Garton from the Rays.
Mm-hmm.
And they got their catcher, Mike Mahima
from
the Rays as well. And I would give anybody $20 if they could read their stat line without looking them up.
Yeah. And be hell,
and be
you
correct.
Be correct. But of course, you know, you got to give them that, like, if you can get it 75% right, we'll get you a little bit of money. But like,
yeah,
there is no way.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, there is no way that you can figure out what these guys have. I mean, hell, it was actually even luck to get Boog Powell's stats, only because, you know, through Fangraphs, only because he's had some major league time. Some other of the guys that you brought up, George Contos, you can get his numbers. The other guy with the Mariners from the Tampa Bay Rays trade, you can get his numbers. But everybody else either doesn't have any major league numbers, or, you know, they're just really difficult to find. Of course, Baseball Reference would have the minor league numbers for minor league players, but through Fangraphs, it's just like, yeah. And so it's just, so through that, it's a difficult way, it's difficult to figure out who's on the waiver list, and you're not going to get those lucrative trades. And unless once in a while you get that quote-unquote Yonder Alonso trade, which, yeah, his stat line can be, you know, skewed one or the other if you look at, you know, on base plus slugging, which would be really nice for him. or, look at his ISO or his BABIP or whatever. But it's just for what the Mariners needed, that was they pretty much got that with Yonder Alonso, but that's it with the August trades,
Yeah.
The August waivers trades. Still trying to figure out what the actual name of this is.
Is it recoverable?
It's revocable.
Revocable.
And I mean, there's some people that spell revocable with a K instead of a C, which for me is kind of funny in a way.
This is America.
Yeah, we can spell whatever we want. But yeah, I mean, but getting back to this, it's just the August waiver trades have just been meh.
Meh.
Eh.
And unless we see a Verlander or a Chris Davis or Cespedes traded, it's just going to remain meh.
Yeah, exactly. And I think really there's nothing else for it besides, the Yonder Alonso trade. But also in other news, quote unquote news, the Los Angeles Dodgers, I know this isn't really something, big for all these baseball fans that that listen and pay attention to what's been going on, but the Los Angeles Dodgers have just been kind of the most dominant team in baseball.
What, one win away from 80 wins?
They're I believe one win away from 80 wins. I believe they still have 50 games to go in their schedule, and Fangraphs, looking at it, Fangraphs projects them to get 30 of 20, 30 of the 50 games. So they would be 109, and I believe it would be 53, if I'm correct, because, 30 of the 50, there's 20 left. And looking at their record right now, yeah, it's possible. And I think, it's kind of possible for them to get really close to that magic number of 116, which the Mariners did back in 2001, but they didn't win a title, which still puzzles me to this day.
It's baseball.
Yeah, and it's the playoffs. Anything can happen in the playoffs.
You got to win the series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that 2001 Mariners team was just insane. Like, how do you win 116 games and just not walk away with a freaking title?
Yeah, holding the trophy in your hands. Again, like you said, it's the game of baseball. Anything could happen. And, really looking back at it, there's other things that are, other variables besides just saying it's playoffs. Also, a team could get hot right into from September into October. That's what happened with the Cardinals back in 2011, where they barely got in to the playoffs. They were the wild card team, and they just, and they won it all. And that's what happens. And also, if you look back at, I believe it was the 27 Yankees, the 1927 Yankees, they had 114 wins, but that team won it because they didn't have to go through a playoff. They just went to the World Series, best of 7, here you go.
Right. And that's the year Ichiro Suzuki had 242 hits.
And wasn't it the first year? It was his rookie year, I believe, and the first year Safeco Field was open, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then you got Brett Boone hitting 331 with 37 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ.
That team was stacked, and maybe we'll one of these days I'll get back to my historical showdown and we'll talk about the.
Well, could we match up the 27 Yankees with the 2001 Mariners?
Yeah, we could do that. I think it will be an interesting matchup.
Take the two most winning seasons and play them off.
Yeah, and I think it will be interesting just to see the lineups that they use, which still puzzles me from the 55 Dodgers, 60, was it 6? No, it was 79 Pirates, that one, where the Dodgers had Jackie Robinson, and this was the computer. Like, I mean, if you've seen it, I always say every time, the computer selects its lineups. The computer selects its team, its playoff, the series team. And it was just interesting that they only used Jackie Robinson as a pinch runner instead of a, just a normal, starter. And it was just really weird to see that. But also that's having, up to the date, this year's game strategies and rules. So, of course, they're going to play it differently. And, of course, we're going to be doing that for the next historical showdown whenever I get the chance. And when that school money comes in, I can get myself a computer, and then it'll be up in my room, and I will enjoy the fruits of my labor by doing a crap ton of those historical showdowns, which will be fun. But, of course, the Dodgers, comparing to the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mariners, they're not going to reach that number, that magical 116, 114 number, unless they just go on a complete tear, unless they beat the Fangraphs projections. But could this Dodgers team beat those teams? Probably. I mean, if you remember correctly in the movie Moneyball, it talks about during the streak, it's like you could play those same 20 games and never have a streak like that. I mean, that's the beauty of baseball. You'll never have the same, you'll have a win or loss outcome, but you never know how the series will unfold. It's, you look at by each pitch, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah. So it would just be cool to see.
Yeah, it would be cool to see how everything goes for that. And, another thing real quick before we get into our other stuff is that the playoff schedule has come out. And, really looking at it, it's going to start on good old October 3rd with I believe it is the AL wildcard game, which I believe, if I remember correctly, if the current wild card goes in, we'll have the Royals and the Yankees go into that. And I believe it was that mystical October 3rd, 2014, that the Royals had played the greatest wild card game ever, I believe.
Hands down.
And so
hands down.
So it might be an omen for them that
I would love it.
That the Royals might have, if it does happen, might have a magical chance to beat the overpowered but young New York Yankees. And then
I'm superstitious enough that I would have to go back and get the same seats.
Yeah. I mean, that's the game of baseball, folks. Superstitions. And then
Section 423, row double Z. I was at the top of the stadium, cement wall right behind me.
I'm imagining it in my mind, and I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's way up there.
Yeah. And then I had the people that I came with asking to leave early. I'm like, no.
No, you don't leave. You don't leave a playoff game early unless it's like unless it's like yesterday with the Royals Cardinals game where just 13 to 4 or whatever. But it's just like you don't leave playoff games early.
No, I told him, I was like, if you want to leave, that's fine. I'll find a ride home. I'll figure it out.
But I mean, besides that, then you have the NL wildcard game the next day. Which
it's going to be Arizona and the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, unless something happens.
And then you got the Brewers, Cardinals, and Pittsburgh 6, 7, and 8 games back.
Yeah, unless something really ridiculous happens, but I'm not expecting that like I was not expecting the Cardinals and the Royals series
To be
so far.
happening right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, everybody that we talk to doesn't like October baseball. And it seems to be that this World Series...
It's not that I don't like October baseball.
Well, not October baseball, but November baseball.
I don't like November baseball. Baseball should be done before Halloween.
And, there is a possibility. It's not going to be like the 2015 series where... Was it like November 2nd when the Royals... Yeah. And that was only Game 5, which is another thing, too.
Like, it could have gone on for 2 more games.
Yeah.
We could have been playing for the first full week of November.
Which would be ridiculous. But of course, things can change with the scheduling and all that stuff. But how it's all set up, the World Series Game 1 will be on Tuesday, October 24th. And then Game 7, if necessary, and if the schedule doesn't change, will possibly end on November 1st, which will be a Wednesday. And so, yeah, that's where it's just kind of been like, what? Really...
Right? Like, why do you want to put a Game 7 on a Wednesday night?
My thing is, why would you want to put a Game 7 in November?
I'm right there with you. But if the playoffs, if every team wins in less than 4 or 5 games, they can move the World Series up.
Yeah, most definitely. I think they have to give like with this, looking at it, the last game before the World Series would be a possible Game 7 in the National League Championship Series, which would be October 22nd. So 2 days before the World Series. And I believe last year it seemed like it was a 3-day cushion from the last CS game to the World Series. And if they tighten up that cushion a little bit, I think it will be best for both the game of baseball, not as a fan, not for the fan perspective, but for the organization as well, to save time and money and not go into November. This, by the time that we're in November baseball, even if it is for one game, most of the people will already be paying attention to either football or soccer. And I say soccer first because I'm more of a soccer guy than a football guy.
I would watch a soccer game over an NFL football game.
Yeah. But to the point, it's just that by the time that happens, it's getting down to the nitty-gritty for the MLS. I believe it will be the second week of playoffs for them. It will be right in the middle of a heated, NFL season, because I'm pretty sure that will be like week 8 or week 9 when it's November.
They'll be hitting mid-season form.
Yeah, and which then it becomes, a watchable season. Because nobody, just to say this real quick, people will watch their teams, through the first few weeks of the season. But then once it gets down to mid to late season, everything intensifies. That's kind of what with baseball, everything intensifies to the very end. And yeah, you're not going to get, you're not going to break Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football ratings with a game on Wednesday in November, but that's just kind of how everything has been. Nobody likes November baseball. Like you said, everything should be done before Halloween, which, it is possible.
No, yeah, it is possible. I do like that at best it's over November 1st.
Mm-hmm.
But if they could have it, if Game 7 would have been on Halloween night, I probably would have liked it more.
Mm-hmm.
Just at minimum, you're done by October.
Mm-hmm. And, if you look at it also, I think the one thing that they should try to do is mess with the scheduling. If they don't want to get rid of 162, they need to do other things, which we should make an episode about, just the scheduling. Right in the off season, let's talk about scheduling and how we should make our own 162 and a 144 scheduling, make sense of all of it, and see if it would kind of work maybe through out of the park baseball.
With the 144 scheduling, what is nice about that, and also not nice, is teams get multiple days off in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're not having baseball every single day. And I think that's what baseball wants right now, is a product that's on TV every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But
go ahead.
If you cut down to 144, you could argue that player health would be better.
Mm-hmm.
To have a better product on the field, because you're not having to rest certain players every other day or every 3 days or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's good and bad arguments for it. You could go back to a 4-man rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have your top of the line ace starter pitching twice a week instead of once a week.
Mm-hmm.
There's perks.
Yeah, there's perks to it, but again, that's baseball now. Of course, we'll save the rest for later, because I had to do something about scheduling when I was fixing up the proposed online league that we want to try to do for the not for only us two, but the not necessarily fan base, even though they are kind of our fans, but our Twitter people wanted to do on Out of the Park Baseball, and I had to do some experiments with scheduling, which is pretty fun. And of course, I'll save that for later. But now, let's talk about what the first part of this conversation with the postseason, the wild card. And really looking at it, you have 6 teams really in kind of in contention. And let's look at this real quick for the AL's, the AL wild card, because like we brought up many of times, the National League wild card is pretty much done, unless somehow the Rockies and the Diamondbacks
just come full on tank.
Just completely fold.
They get blown up in an airplane accident.
That's horrible to say, but that's kind of the truth. Like, it has to be something really ridiculous. Yeah, for them to fail. I mean, it would have to be so catastrophic. You have to go back to 2011 and look at the Boston Red Sox. 99.7% chance of making it into the playoffs on September 1st, but the .3 took over and they completely missed the playoffs. So it would have to be something catastrophic like that. But, looking at the wild card teams, just to go through the rundown, we have the New York Yankees being the first wild card team, which would have the home field advantage. Then you have the Kansas City Royals, the Seattle Mariners, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Baltimore Orioles, the Minnesota Twins, and the Los Angeles Angels. And, what's been really kind of interesting in a way, from the Yankees to the Angels, there's only a 3-game spread. Well, if you look at Minnesota, it's a 4-game spread.
And the Orioles, Twins, and Angels aren't above 500.
Yeah, which is really, it's almost kind of looking at it through the NBA perspective, how like 3 or 4 teams out in the East are like under 500 teams, but still make it to the playoffs because that's how everything is formatted. But of course, in baseball, we don't have those problems. You go by the best of it. You go by the winners of the division and the top 2 wild card teams that can play. And you look at these teams, and are those other teams going to make it? The the line is over Baltimore. And those guys, Baltimore, Minnesota, and the Los Angeles Angels both have under 500 records, like Phillip brought up. Baltimore is a 56-57, Minnesota is 55-56, and the Los Angeles Angels are 56-58. But Baltimore and the Twins, the O's and the Twins, are a game and a half back, and the Angels are only 2. And I mean, if you look at everybody else, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Kansas City, they're all fighting for that third spot, which, I mean, it's going to be, well, not third spot, but second spot. And it's going to be really close to the very end, if, just looking at it. And really, you could look at the Yankees, you could look at Boston, you can look at Cleveland, and the reason why I kind of bring those guys up is that...
Because right now, the East and Central Division, AL, they're only leading by 4 games.
Yeah, and that's where it's kind of tricky.
It's a good possibility that the Yankees and the Royals could very well overtake that top spot in the division.
Mm-hmm. And, for right now, it's going to be hard for the Yankees. I mean,
it's going to be hard for the Royals, too.
Yeah.
But for argument's sake, they're still only 4 games back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like looking at the West Division where the Mariners are 14 back, or the NL East where the Marlins are 13, and the Arizona Diamondbacks are 15 back of the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm. And so
those divisions are more or less set.
Yeah, and there's kind of reasons why we don't talk about those divisions anymore per se, because they're so set. There's kind of no reason to talk about it. It's just like talking about how good Los Angeles is and just nitpicking the reasons why Los Angeles is so good. The Dodgers, I mean.
Yeah, and the only other division that's really, truly like a true race right now is the NL Central, where the Cubs are leading by the Brewers by game and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Cardinals are only 2.5, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are 3.5. The Pirates, since getting Marte back, have started playing really well.
Mm-hmm. And, real quick, if I can get my numbers up, since the second half has started, the Yankees, the Red Sox, have a win-loss record of 14-11 and 14-10, respectively. Then you have the Cubs winning 16 games, the Dodgers winning 18, the Mariners winning 15, Cardinals with 14, Pirates with 14, and so on and so forth. Orioles winning 14 games. And when you look at it a little bit more, the Pirates have done some stuff. They've won 14 out of the 24 games, 14-10, like I brought up. But that's what's been happening. They've been winning games. And if you probably look at the first half and second half splits, it's going to be a different story, of course. And like you said, when Marte getting back into the everyday lineup after his suspension was pretty much getting, quote-unquote trading for a superstar for nothing. Literally nothing.
Yeah, of their last 30, they're 19-11.
Mm-hmm.
Last 20, 11-9. Last 10, 6-4.
Mm-hmm.
And compare that to the top wildcard team in the AL, the Yankees. Last 10, 4-6. Last 20, 12-18. Last 30, 15-15.
Mm-hmm.
So, where would the Pirates be if they were in the AL?
They probably still be fighting for that, wild
card spot, but they'd be a lot closer than they were.
Mm-hmm. They probably,
because they're 56 and 57,
mm-hmm.
so that puts them right with Baltimore, game and a half back.
Mm-hmm. And since they won last night, it actually puts them over Baltimore, but not into the second spot of the wild card.
No, but that's just kind of how wide open this wild card in the AL is, and that's kind of how wide open the NL Central is right now.
Mm-hmm. And
and that's
go ahead.
That's how it's shaping up. That's just how it's shaping up right now. Is that those two races are really the ones that are going to be at the forefront from August until the end of September.
Mm-hmm. And, let's get down to the business. Let's talk about, first of all, before we get into the AL wild card, because that's going through so many teams, so many variables. Let's talk about the NL Central. Let's go through every little tidbit about this, about this division. And looking at it through the standings, the Chicago Cubs have a nice 59-53 record, but Milwaukee's just right behind them, like we brought up a game and a half back, which is a 59-56. St. Louis with a 57-56, 2.5 games back. Pittsburgh with a 56-57, which they're finally about to reach that 500 mark with 3.5 games back. And then lone Cincinnati, which we won't talk about, but at least give them a shout out. 46-67, and they're 13.5 games back. But let's shrink it down to the top 4 teams in that spot: the Cubs, the Brewers, the Cardinals, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And first of all, let's start out with the Chicago Cubs. And this team has improved a bit. If you look back at it from since the start of the second half, which we brought up, they're 16-8. And what's been really interesting is that some of their guys haven't been producing as well. If you look at it per se, you have Jason Hayward with a 267. Kyle Schwarber is actually bringing his numbers up from the second half with the 250, and Ben Zobrist has been another guy that hasn't done a whole bunch. He has a 240 batting average. But if you look at the other guys, you look at Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, and the surprising guy out of all of this, Wilson Contreras, the catcher for the Cubs. They all have 280-plus batting averages, and especially Wilson Contreras with a 322 starting from the second half. And I believe he won Player of the Week for last week. So he's been producing well. If you look at it real quick, he's really the home run leader for this team with 10 since the second half started. He has an 18.8% K rate and a 9.4 walk percentage. And he's just been doing well. He's the top guy from the start of the second half to now. And then, if you try to look at it from, Anthony Rizzo or Chris Bryant, they're still producing. They're still, doing something, but it's not, it's been more kind of a support to Wilson Contreras' numbers. Of course, Bryant has a 311. He had 311 batting average, 360 on base percentage, and a 456 slugging percentage. And his K rate and his walk rate really helps that out. And then you have Anthony Rizzo, which he hasn't been doing well this year. I believe his overall batting average has been around 260. But since the second half, it looks much better. Of course, smaller sample sizes are kind of a good, medium sample sizes are kind of a good way to tell. Right about the 70 to 120 plate appearance range is a really good indication of where those players are right now. And Anthony Rizzo, 284 batting average, 394 on base percentage, and a 523 slugging percentage. And he still does produce. He has 6 home runs and 15 RBIs. But of course, the guy that everybody, a guy that you should look at has been Wilson Contreras. With those numbers, he has been doing well. And another guy that you should look at has been Javi Baez. He's, kind of the darling from last year's World Series run, right beside Kyle Schwarber. But like I said, Schwarber hasn't done a lot with that 250 batting average. He has that nice 338 on base percentage and a 567. But if you look at Baez's numbers, he has a 309 average, 365 on base percentage, and a 632 slugging percentage. And he's getting those he has 15 RBIs. But the thing is, just like Schwarber, they don't have patience at the plate. They both have 30+% strikeout percentages when they're up there. And that's really bad. That's really terrible. And I mean, if you want to compare, look at Rizzo, Bryant, and Contreras real quick. 16.3, 16%, and an 18.8 K percentage. And that's where it's been kind of the way to go with the Chicago Cubs, hitting wise. And then what about them pitching? And you look at John Lester, he has that nice 3.03 ERA with a 3.26 FIP. Jake Arrieta has had some struggles early on in this season, but has really come down back to earth in the second half with a 2.20 ERA and a 3.90 FIP. Kyle Hendricks with a 2.76 ERA and a 3.51 FIP. And then it gets kind of a little gray here. You got Jose Quintana with a 4.20 ERA, John Lackey with a 3 ERA, which is still good. Don't get me wrong, but his FIP doesn't really help him with a 5.19, and Mike Montgomery with a 4.35 ERA and a 5.75 FIP. And you don't have to worry necessarily much about their walks per 9 because the highest guy is John Lackey with a 3, but everybody else is underneath that. You have Montgomery with a 2.61, Jose Quintana with a 2.10, Hendricks is at a 1.10. Same John Lester has a 1.65. Jake Arrieta has a 1.93, and they're not being lights out either. Which you always want that lights out ace with your pitching. They got some of these guys have a K per per 9. John Lester has a 9.2, and Jose Quintana with a 10.2. But it's just looking at it, Jake Arrieta is not really throwing BBs with a 7.44, Kyle Hendricks with a 7.16, Lackey with a 6.86, and Mike Montgomery with a 6.10. But some of those guys, especially Lackey and Montgomery, to my knowledge, haven't been really the guys to be throwing BBs, unlike Jake Arrieta and Kyle Hendricks. But, I mean, what more can I say about that?
Really not a whole lot. It's just an overall improvement from the Cubs.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, it's been really, like you said, an overall improvement. And it's not even that – I mean, it's pretty bad for everybody else that's in that division because, earlier in the season, the Cubs were, a team that were that was 500, not really what was projected to be throughout this whole season. We were, a lot of people were speculating that they would just zip through the division and win.
Yeah, that
outright.
Was our projection. Our projections that from day one that the Cubs would just run over the division.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen, but it's nice to see that they have come back to improve and that they can kind of have a little bit of adversity and work through it.
Mm-hmm. And, for me, I hate to say that, it's great that they improve because I'm a Cardinals fan, but it's also good for me. It's good for me to see that they're doing good, so I am that quote-unquote soothsayer that I like to say about myself, and I was like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Calling it hopefully correctly for the playoffs, but it seems like it's coming down to, every single day is, nearing to the end, and it's almost like I don't think my teams are going to do well. They're
right.
going to make it to the playoffs, but I mean that happens though. You're not really shooting for perfection, even though you kind of want to shoot for perfection, even though you look at older data and see what's been going on with it. So.
Oh man. So what?
Yeah,
Brewers?
I was about to say. Do you have any questions for me about that?
No, man. I think you handled that one pretty well.
And so, yeah, which then you just brought up with the Milwaukee Brewers. I wanted to call them the National Brewers for some odd reason. But
And starting with their pitching, they're getting some pretty good starting pitching in the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Zach Davies has the most innings pitched in the last 30 days, and he has a 2.12 ERA. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Nelson, 3.03. Brent Suter, 3.67. This is where it starts to get a little shady, where you got Matt Garza with the 5.68, Junior Guerrero with the 5.68, and Carlos Torres with the 3.18.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of look at their bullpen guys, Josh Hader with the 0.9, and Jacob Barnes, this is bad, but 7.45. Corey Knebel with a 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went out, the big guy they went out and got traded for, Anthony Swarzak, in his 5 innings with the Brewers, he's hitting 169.
Mm-hmm.
Or ERA with the 169.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they went out and got Jeremy Jeffries from the Rangers, and in his 2 innings with the Brewers, has an ERA with the 6.75.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got guys that have good strikeout rates. Jimmy Nelson, for one, is 11.02 K per 9.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Hader with a 12.6 K per 9. Corey Knebel with a 16 K per 9.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting good pitching, and that's kind of what we talked about, what they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
That if they were going to stay competitive, they needed to go out and at least at minimum beef up their bullpen. And with Anthony Swarzak, they did that with a 13.5 K per 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that 13.5 is just ridiculous. And then Knebel's 16 K per 9 is just lights out, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's what the Brewers needed to maintain at least a shot at their division, because their wild card hopes are very, very slim.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the wild card for the NL, they're 6 games back compared to only being
a game and a half.
Game back from the game and a half
much.
game and a half back.
Yeah.
So if they're going to make a run, it's going to have to be at the division, because catching the Rockies or the Diamondbacks just doesn't seem plausible. And then they're hitting, you want it to be better.
Yeah.
And that's what hurt them.
Yeah, just looking at it, it was just kind of like, your best players from the first half, Eric Thames, Travis Shaw.
231.
Yeah, 231, 259. I mean, Jonathan Villar and Orlando Arcia. Just
Manny Pena, for some reason, is hitting really over 300 the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you brought up Villar, who's hitting 179. Jesus Aguilar's hitting 180.
Mm-hmm.
Keon Broxton's hitting 190. You got a guy in the last 30 days, has 33 at-bats, hitting .061 in Eric Sogard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they only have 4 guys above the 100 average line of the WRC+.
Mm-hmm. And
so that's kind of where the Brewers kind of lost their edge on the division.
Mm-hmm. And, really just looking at it, you look at all the guys that have been, their top billing. Domingo Santana, Travis Shaw, Jesus Aguilar, the guys that we just named. What doesn't help them out, though, are the strikeouts, the strikeout percentages for these guys. And let's go through it real quick. Thames has a 37.5.
His has been high all year, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's typical of him, and typical for a guy, that came here after the KBO, which the KBO is just a ridiculous league for home runs. I mean, they're pretty much the league that started the bat flip. And there's actually a really nice article from ESPN all about that. And I mean, it's interesting. It's just interesting about that. But getting back to this, then you have Jesus Aguilar, guy that's had 53 plate appearances, has a 35.8% K rate. Jonathan Villar, 36.8. Keon Broxton, 40. Domingo Santana, 32.3. And there's, 25. Could you say that 25 to 20% should be kind of the average for the K percentage?
I would say 20 to 25. Yeah. Mm. That's not a stretch.
Yeah. But almost half the guys that, have put substantial amounts to the team, Travis Shaw, another guy. Actually, I believe he's the guy with the most plate appearances so far from the start of the second half to now for the Brewers, has a 29.2% K percentage.
You were talking about strikeout percentage?
Yeah, strikeout percentage.
Do you want to guess what George Brett's was for his career?
I want to say 18.9.
7.8.
There you go. I don't know what else to say because
that's just absurd.
Yeah,
only reason I brought that up is because we're talking about being okay with guys striking out 20% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't have been a thing when George Brett played.
Mm-hmm. That would be you probably getting cut from the team.
Yeah. You put the ball in play, you don't strike out.
And that's how baseball was back then.
Yeah.
Home runs, that it brings the money. But if you actually get contact and actually get in, that brings in the money. That gives you the money. If you if you hit home runs, that's for show. As the great Anonymous once said about golf, drive for show, putt for dough. And that's how it's been. That's how it's always been for golf, but also for baseball. Yeah, you can have guys that are, hitting them those 45 home runs, but look back at Chris Davis, 30+% K rate. For me, that's kind of, first of all, I'd slap him, tell him to be patient, and then give him incentives to have a K percentage, a strikeout percentage of lower than 15%. Maybe that's what I should do for out of the park baseball. Maybe we'll sway my players to actually try to be patient at the plate, and then they can get those nice incentives.
Exactly. But
you can only experiment.
Besides the Brewers not really hitting, there's not a whole lot else to really say much about them.
Yeah, and kind of the good thing about this, in a way, is that they only have 3 guys that are injured at the moment. Stephen Vogt, Jet Bandy, two guys that are catchers, and then Chase Anderson, which he's starting pitcher, but those guys are on the 10-day DL, and those injuries just recently happened. So that's kind of the good thing. They don't have a lot of injuries, and that's kind of the same thing with the Cubs too. The Cubs don't really have a lot of injuries. They're just not doing well. They're not doing what the Cubs were expected to do. And, the other team that's right behind them that has been kind of a mishmash of both, which we've talked about, earlier this year, how this team was a mixture of both. The Cubs where they haven't been doing well, but, it was the mixture of the Cubs having star players that aren't doing well, and then the Milwaukee Brewers doing well but don't have a lot of name, like some of the players, some of the
name
unknowns. Yeah, name recognitions. Some of the players that we don't know are doing well, and some of the players that we do know that aren't doing well. And that's, the St. Louis Cardinals. And you look back at it, and they're 14-10 since the second half started. they really, they only have 2 guys on the disabled list, which is, Alex Reyes, of course. They have to keep him on the, the 40-man. And then Kevin Segras, which that just happened recently, forearm tendonitis. So he's going to be coming back pretty soon. But that's, that's not the problem. The problem has been what I like to call not being patient at all. You have guys that, Paul DeJong, a guy that came up through the ranks, now finally a big league Cardinal, 33.7. Randall Grichuk, another guy that came up through the ranks, even though these, and which is kind of funny with these two, is that Grichuk, he has a 30.3 strikeout rate, but has a better batting average than DeJong, which DeJong has
that's because
250.
Grichuk's contact percentage is 81% compared to DeJong's 73.8.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that is the difference maker, though. Because if you look at, Babbitt, you look at, contact percentage, on base percentage, and so, so on and so forth, Randall Grichuk's the better guy, but it's kind of, the funny thing about it, he's not really technically better. He's not physically better. They're both the same guys. They're just getting lucky. And, I got to be harsher, I got to be more harsh on my guys because it's my team. But sometimes these guys don't produce. And Randall Grichuk, a boomer bust guy. Again, that K rate, his strikeout rate, and his walk rate are just the range the range of them is really bad. Paul DeJong's range between his strikeout rate and walk rate is really significant as well. But go ahead.
I was saying just the last 30 days, though, the Cardinals have been able to turn around their hitting.
Mm-hmm.
Getting good hitting out of Tommy Pham at 326, and he only strikes out 23.2% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Carpenter is turning it around with a 309 and 18.8% strikeout rate.
Mm-hmm.
Molina is hitting 329 with a 19% strikeout rate. Colton Wong is maintaining at the 286 and a 15.9%.
Mm-hmm.
Jed Jerko has last 30 days has not been well for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, you're getting really good production out of Jose Martinez again.
Mm-hmm.
He's only had 31 at bats, but he's hitting 323 and only striking out 16.7% of the time. He has an OPS of a 1.121
mm-hmm.
and a 187 WRC plus, which in the last 30 days leads the team.
Mm-hmm.
He only swings his bat 35.9% of the time, and he's making contact 80.3% of the time.
And an interesting fact, we bring up how ridiculously high strikeout percentages for DeJong and Grichuk. But let's reverse the script here for Jose Martinez. He has a 23.8 walk percentage. That's absurd. That is an absurd amount. And his strikeout percentage is a 16.7. So it's just, why, for me, I don't know why they don't put him in more often. The numbers that you just gave me, if I saw those, I'd be like, all right, you're going to be everyday right fielder. And that's been kind of one of the problems is the outfield. Go ahead.
With Biscotti getting sent down,
mm-hmm.
it's a very good chance that he turns into the everyday right fielder.
Mm-hmm.
Because you put Grichuk in left, right?
You would have Grichuk in left. You would
and Fowler in center.
Fowler or Pham in center. It's mixed depending on what they want to do with Fowler, and Jose Martinez in right. But then again, you have Dexter Fowler that is a switch hitter,
and
so he can
Jose
go
Martinez
anywhere.
can play first base.
Mm-hmm.
And if Jerko or Garcia needs time off, Matt Carpenter can play second.
Mm-hmm. And that's been kind of the problem, though, is just there's no set players at their respective spots. Is because you have DeJong playing at shortstop, or you have DeYoung playing at third because somebody can't play, either Jerko can't play third or Carpenter has to play can't play third because they have to fill other roles. And that's been kind of, if they could hit, 280 plus, average with an on-base percentage of 350 plus, I'd be okay with that. And, some of the guys are doing that. But some of the guys aren't. And that's where it's kind of a problem. Jed Jerko, you've already brought up, that 184 batting average with a 273 on-base percentage and a 289 slugging. He's been kind of a problem. He can play the position, can play third base. That's what we got him for, third base and shortstop. But if he can't hit, then what's the point of putting him in? And that kind of brings up to your Alex Gordon effect. He can play this position well, but if he can't hit, what's the point?
At what point do you have to take him out?
Yeah, and that's where it's just been. That's where you've seen Matt Carpenter. Yeah, go ahead.
And at this time of the year, you will start to see that.
Yeah, and that's where go ahead.
The managers will realize that they can't continue to let him try to find it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's you hit the batting cages, you'll start every other day, every 3 days, but we can't afford for you to be in the lineup anymore if we're going to make a run at this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just, at that point, we have jobs, and if we aren't performing well, we'll get taken off our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like, you would hope that, they're major league athletes, that they take that in stride and just be like, well, fuck, okay. Let me go back to work and see if I can go back and help this team.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking at your starting pitching, though, you're getting really good starting pitching out of 4 out of your 5 guys.
Mm-hmm. Which has been a godsend lately, thank the Lord.
It is. Lance Lynn with a 148 ERA. Michael Walker with a 261. Michael Walker's having a nice comeback year.
Yeah, and,
that's really good to see.
Yeah, and a lot of people, earlier in the
doubted
year,
him going this was a year he would either be that 5th starter or the guy coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, he was going to be. That was kind of the whole speculation. Is he going to be the guy that he was going to be in 2013, or going to be in the bullpen? And it's been great because
it is.
I've been
That's good to see for you guys when you can have guys Martinez, Waka, and Luke Weaver going into next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really solid 3.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Weaver does have a 4.76 ERA, but this is his first year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even a full year.
Yeah.
So
he's only been up through, if somebody gets injured. Adam Wainwright was the recent injury, and that's why he was up for 2 games.
And Adam Wainwright, though, in his last 30 days, his last 16 innings, 3.86 ERA. He's not striking out a lot of guys. His strikeout rate is 9.7%.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's figuring out how to get guys out, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and
not let runs score. You can't argue with that kind of production. Especially Trevor Rosenthal has really improved with a .82 ERA and 11 innings pitched.
Mm-hmm.
So your bullpen's starting to step up, which had been kind of the problem for you guys.
Yeah, the first half of the season was all bullpen. They couldn't.
Yep. Tyler Lyons in 8 innings has exactly 0 ERA.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Bowman 2.35 in 7 innings. The guys that you've used the most: Brett Cecil in 11, 3.27. John Brebbia.
And I want to say something about Brett Cecil real quick. Earlier in the season, we were contemplating why the hell the Cardinals needed to get Brett Cecil. He was, good to decent, decent to good relief pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. There was moments where he showed, Mariano Rivera's stuff, not necessarily his pitches, but his numbers. And we were wondering why we needed to get this guy and give him 4 years. I believe it was like 80 million. I get my numbers there's so many contracts that have been ridiculous lately for the Cardinals. It's been kind of, confusing me in my mind, but now it's showing. It's showing the reason why. He's getting on the good side. He's got that 3.27 ERA, that 3.59 FIP. But you were talking about John Brebbia, a guy that came up through the system. He has that nice 2.45 ERA with a 3.32 FIP. He has that really, really nice left on base percentage that you really love with a 95.2.
Yeah. And Singwon Oh as well, in his 9 innings pitched, 2.89 ERA, but his left on base is 69.8%. So if they could start going away from him in high leverage situations and use Brebbia, Cecil, and Lyons and Rosenthal, I understand that the NL has to use more pitchers, but they have the opportunity to at least get 4 innings out of those guys.
And that, like you said, it's just, something that they have to go through. But also, if you look at the past few games against the Cardinals, they've only been in not as tight of situations. I mean,
no, they've pummeled the Royals. They've scored double digits the last 2 games.
Actually, the last 3 games. They've scored, I believe they scored 13 runs on Sunday against the Reds. But it's just that if you look at it, if you got, guys that can, hit the ball, the starting pitchers become more relaxed. They have the opportunities to strike out guys more, strike their opponents out more because they're down by so much. They are trying to get on base, so they're swinging at almost everything. And then they go, 7, 8, 9 innings. Here's your guys, like what the 2015 Royals did. Get to the 6th, get to the 7th, let the bullpen take it. And that's what's been going on, the last few days. And, of course, like I said before, Cardinals fan or any type of fan is going to dissect everything so quickly. They're going to look at the small things. And there's going to be moments where Brett Cecil looks great, but then he gives up like a 3-run home run, which has happened this year.
And when you're the pitcher, though, you're on the mound, you're center of attention. So you're going to remember a 3-run home run more than a guy striking out in the 4th inning with 2 runners on.
And that's been kind of the thing. And so for the Cardinals, it's been great. For me, it's been kind of puzzling how they've been doing so well. But I mean, what else can you really say about these Cardinals? And they're finally getting their stuff done, and that's been kind of to the point where now it's, there's that one team we brought up. The Pirates have been the guys that have been nipping at their heels ever since the Pirates got good at the start of the second half. And you got to look at guys. You got to look at Andrew McCutchen, has a nice 289 batting average. He's been himself this year. Last year he didn't do so well. This year he's been doing well. Andrew McCutchen, like I said, a 289 batting average with a 406 on base and a 518 slugging. Yeah, go ahead.
And he's hit 6 home runs in 30 days. And then Josh Bell is having a good 30 days with a 286 and a 108 WRC plus and a 789 OPS. And he's only striking out 9. Like, this team only has, in the last 30 guys, only has 2 guys above a 20% strikeout rate. And they're not swinging. They only have 2 guys above a 50% swing rate. So they're seeing a lot of pitches. They're not swinging at a lot of them, and they're not striking out. They're
being patient at the plate, which that's been kind of, going back to the Cardinals, that's been kind of the problem for them, even though they're getting it done, especially the last 3 days.
And speaking of former Cardinals, David Freese, in his 74 at-bats, is hitting 383 with an 896 OPS, 141 WRC plus, but he is one of the guys with a 21.8% strikeout percentage. But you'll take that when he's hitting 383.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's still and he's only swinging 39.4% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not swinging at bad pitches. He's making contacts pretty much 78% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been the resurgence of the Pirates.
Yeah.
And
go
and
ahead.
Adam Frazier, who's hitting 420. But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you just got guys that have been kind of, I don't know if it's because Starling Marte's back in the lineup that these guys are getting pitched to differently.
There's that possibility, and I was about to bring up Starling Marte. Even though he doesn't have the numbers like he was, last year or just the few games that he played earlier this year, he has a 253 batting average with a 326 on base percentage and a 301 slugging percentage. He's hitting he's putting the ball in play with a 304 BABIP, but it's been a difference maker because he has that low strikeout rate at a 15.2. So it's just been that's where I'm just trying to say that it's been a difference maker, because if you just look at the guys, yeah, they're not crushing the ball per se, but they're actually they're getting on base, and that's kind of the thing that you want to do in baseball, is to get on base.
Yeah, and with the Pirates, that's really about it. For their hitting, it's just that. Do we know if Starling Marte just being in the lineup has affected the way these pitchers pitch to different hitters?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Something's made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the biggest difference is they're not striking out a lot, they're not swinging out a lot, and they're making a lot of contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been kind of the thing. And, you bring up striking, swinging a lot, striking out a lot. You look at their pitching, and you have Chad Kuhl starting pitching specifically. You have Chad Kuhl with an 8.1 K per 9, Jared Cole with an 8.72 K per 9, James Talon 9.64, and Ivan Nova with a straight 9. And
then Trevor Williams, though, in his 30.2 innings is a 6.46, but he has a 2.64 ERA and a 77.1% left on base, which is second best of the starting rotation right now.
Mm-hmm. And that's right behind Jared Cole in a way, where Cole has an 86.2% left on base percentage, has that nice 2.53 ERA with a 3.36 FIP, and Trevor Williams is a guy came up through the ranks. We were expecting Glasnow to be up there now. Jameson Talon. I want to call him James Talon. But, and Chad Kuhl, another guy that came through their system. Kuhl, Cole, and Williams have been doing well. Talon has had some moments. Ivan Nova has had some moments if you look at their ERAs. But they're not that far off. If you look at their fielding independent pitching, it's a 264, 336, 320, 301, and a 537. So they're not far from each other per se. There's been some defensive miscues from, when Jameson Talon is in, but overall these guys look good enough,
and
to really contend.
And the relief corps is doing just as good.
Mm-hmm.
Juan Niasco with a 1.46 ERA in 12 innings. AJ Skugel with a .84. Felipe Riviero, a guy of many trade talks.
Yes.
Many. Right now it has a 3.48
in
the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
Wade LeBlanc with a 6 ERA. Then we got Jan Marinez.
Hold on. Yeah, Marinez
with a 2.16 and 8 in the third innings pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Watson with a 2.57.
Well, you can't really say much about Tony Watson now. He was traded to the Dodgers. So it looks good now, but
why is he still showing up then?
Because he registered, some pitching time.
Yeah,
he
registered the last 30 days, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. But the guys I listed before that, the 5 guys I listed before that, are pitching relatively well for them.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's been kind of the good thing. And they've been, you look at that, you look at their, ERAs, you look at their left on base percentages. Some of them have higher percentages than others. Their strikeout rate, the K per nines are really ridiculous. Juan Nolasco has a 10.22. Felipe Rivero has an 11.32. Daniel Hudson has a 10.13. And Dovdes, I'm going to try for it. Neverakas. I'm going to go with Neverakas.
And yeah, in his 4 innings pitched has a 0 ERA.
Mm-hmm. And so 11.25 K per nine. So
yeah, and his FIP lines up about right with the .64, xFIP with the 286, and his WAR is a .2. So if they can get that kind of production for the rest of the season, who's not to argue that the Pirates can't make a run at the Cubs?
Yeah, exactly. And, especially with Tony Watson being gone, it's kind of a good thing that they do have it up because he registered for the Pirates pitching wise. But you can kind of see that, some of the guys underneath him have the opportunity to really
do just as well.
To do just as well when he's gone. So I mean, it's going to be up in the air. It's going to be up in the air how everything is going to go down with the NL wild card, and it's going to be something that I'll definitely be watching the whole time. I mean, checking standings, checking scores, throughout the night when it comes to this. So, I mean, it's going to happen, But anyway, that's it about the NL Central. We're going to take a quick break here for the MLBeers podcast, and after we come back from the break, we will talk about the AL wild card. Alrighty, we'll be right back. Hello, folks. Welcome back to the second part of the MLBeers program, and of course, we're going to be talking about the second part of our name, the beers portion of the podcast. And Phil, what do you have today for us?
Today, I'm drinking the tall boy version of Oscar Blues.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yep. Oscar Blues Brewing Company, Pinner Throwback IPA, which is their session IPA coming in at 4.9%. And when I mean tall boy, I mean it is 1 pint and 3.2 fluid ounces.
Yeah, though the Pinner is a pretty good throwback IPA. It's a pretty
nice
good,
nice and sessionable. Has a nice what am I trying to think of? Tropical kind of fruity hotness to it. Pineapple.
I could see that. It's been a while since I've actually had the Pinner, and I believe the last time that I've had the Pinner was when they did I'm gonna say kind of a what's the word that I'm thinking of?
They infused it with
passion
fruit.
With passion fruit. That's the one that I had, and it wasn't bad.
Fruit?
Yes, it was passion fruit, and it wasn't bad at all. I mean, I thought the original Pinner was better than with the passion fruit. I believe the passion fruit was a little bit lighter, but again, that was quite some time ago when I actually had that. But
I haven't had the Pinner since it came out, its original debut.
Mm-hmm.
But I stopped when I was running errands. I stopped at the craft beer cellar, and they had one tall boy left for like $3. So I'm like, why not?
That's a deal.
Yeah, I was like, I'll take it.
Because I mean, a couple weeks back, they had a 4-pack of the tall boy Founders All Day IPA, and it was like $7, I believe, or like $4. I can't remember exactly, but I was like, that's pretty freaking cheap for
$4. It was $1.
Somewhere around that. It was like between $4 and $7.
A little over $1 per pint.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
And
I would take that like every time.
Mm-hmm. And
because you get a whole tall boy out of it, so you drink 2 of them, you'll be all right.
Yeah, and especially the day before I went to the liquor store and get that, I was at a bar and they had a special buy with the Founders All Day IPA where they gave you a the tall boy can, plus a special edition koozie that was pretty much essentially the labeling for the can, but in a koozie form. So that was pretty
awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that was pretty cool in my opinion.
That is really cool.
And for me, I will be having the Mother's Oktoberfest beer, which is a lager style beer, if people don't know what an Oktoberfest beer is. And I really think, to be honest with you, I think it's one of the best seasonals that they put out.
It's at least when Mothers, like for me, their year rounds they're good.
Mm-hmm.
They're nothing to write home about. They're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's really their seasonals and their one-offs that they do really well.
Yes, and especially since they came out with not only the Oktoberfest, but I think I talked about this last week, how they came out with a new beer called the Cobra Scare 53 Ozark Style Ale. And if I remember correctly, I had to talk to somebody about it, and they said it was a wheat sour beer, which I was very interested in. But then actually getting to taste it, it wasn't bad. It was.
But you told me you got served in a frosty mug, though.
Yeah, that's where it was.
Can we talk about how that's a huge no-no?
Yeah, we can do that real quick. We got time.
Okay. When you serve a beer in a frosty mug, you lose most of its flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's too cold. Most beer, especially beers like sour beers and your higher ABV saisons, stouts, and even your IPAs, need to be drank close-ish to room temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when you get all the other flavors that expand out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to smell it in before you drink it. Mm-hmm. And then as you're drinking in, take a breath through your nose. And if you have the right kind of glass, your nose is going to be right up next to the liquid. Mm-hmm. And you breathe out after you swallow. Mm-hmm. And then that's when you get the full kind of range of flavor.
Yeah, get that nice aroma and everything else in between. Get the full taste of it. And with that, having a frosted pint glass, I believe... I mean, it's not their fault because they probably did not know how it was supposed to be served. But pint glasses are, they're the all-around glass to use. But it's
especially most dive bars.
Yeah, but it's definitely not the glassware for that typical beer. I believe it would have been either a Pilsner glass or a tulip glass.
Go with the classic tulip. It serves many purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And, that's the beer that we're drinking today. And it's a enjoyable day, for me at least, out in the Ozarks area, per se. But anyway, now we're here to talk about the wild card of the American League. And before... we said that it was the Yankees, the Royals, the Seattle Mariners, Tampa Bay Rays, Baltimore, Minnesota, and the Angels. And what's been kind of interesting, though, I think the least to say before we really delve into this, is that the Baltimore Orioles and the Los Angeles Angels are like the two teams that really have came out of nowhere But are they, really the teams to really try to make it into the wild card? That's what I'm trying to say. I'm overthinking a little bit, but besides that, I mean, I think it was kind of interesting that to see those teams really come out of nowhere and really do well. And
they're definitely a surge forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Twins are 5-5 their last 10, the Angels are 6-4, and the Baltimore Orioles are 7-3 in their last 10.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, which has been kind of a surprise because I believe like Baltimore, I think a week after the All-Star break, they were just slumping like none other. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's how everything goes. I mean, I think it's of course it's the wild card. It's always going to be a wild one, and especially this year, it's
especially in the AL.
Yeah,
the AL is shaping up to be August and September baseball might be more exciting this year than it has in years past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing about it is that like we said, like if we try to go back to looking at the quote unquote predictions that we had the Yankees being 4th place, nowhere around here. Kansas City possibly getting in by.
I was gonna say I think I had them as my second wild card.
Yes, by the skin of their teeth. I had Seattle in as one of my teams. And I still have that hot take that they will make it into the playoffs. Tampa Bay, a team that I believe we thought was the 5th place team in the AL East. Really,
because we expected better things out of Texas and Toronto.
Texas, Toronto, and a little bit of Baltimore because I thought Baltimore was more of a surefire pick than the Seattle Mariners in a way, but Baltimore faltered in the first half. Now's trying to climb back out of it. So, I mean, that's how we kind of see it, though.
Yep.
Wouldn't you say? And so,
no.
So let's actually delve into this, and let's talk about the top team of the wild card, the New York Yankees. And really, if you look at it, we got to start. We actually not starting with either the batting, the position players, or the pitching. We kind of have to start looking at their disabled list real quick. They have Matt Holliday on the 10-day. Tyler Austin, pretty much a backup for them, is on the 10-day. Greg Bird, he was on the 60-day DL list. He had ankle surgery in May, which has kind of been mishap a little bit. Starlin Castro has been recently on the 10-day DL. I think he was out for a couple weeks. And then Aaron Hicks, another guy that can play outfield and first base and DH, has been injured, but he's actually about to come back. As said by Roster Resource, he is he's at rehab right now. So,
and it begs the conclusion that what happened to Aaron Judge.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I would have had it pulled up. But I saw a really cool kind of heat map of how pitchers are pitching him now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
Yeah, they actually last night.
And like the sliders they're throwing to him are now down and away.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fastballs he's getting are more chest high and above.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were actually talking about that last night before the Cardinals-Royals game, is how like the guys were kind of stunned, but the one guy that explained it all was like, no, that's just how the pitchers actually, they adjusted and they're giving it to him, and he's, swinging and missing right now. Since
now it's on him to adjust.
Yeah, and since the second half, he has a 175 batting average, a 337 on base percentage, and the 363. Not bad. That's 700 on base plus slugging.
His strikeout rate has just spiked.
Yes.
At a 36.6%.
Yes, really, really high up there, and it has an incredible walk rate too at a 20, almost 20. It's a 19.8 walk percentage, but his
contact rate's not good either at 62.2%.
Yeah, he's just been going downhill ever since then. And the guy, it's his first year. You got to give the guy a little bit of a break. He's not going to be like a Corey Seager. He's not.
And they got good guys that are kind of picking him up.
Yeah.
Chase Headley's hitting 345.
Mm-hmm.
Didi Gregorius is hitting 351. Ronald Torres is hitting 309.
Mm-hmm.
They have a good guy coming in, Garrett Cooper, who looks like he's filling in part-time, hitting 286.
Mm-hmm.
And Clint Frazier's is hitting 230. And these are all stats the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
But some of their big guys that's helped them through the year so far, like you said, Holiday's on the DL. Judge is hitting 175. Jacoba Ellsbury is hitting 159.
Mm-hmm.
So they got some guys that are struggling on their batting.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Yankees are going to maintain it, they've been doing fine. But if they want to get back to where they were, they got to get their bats back in order.
And, really one thing to point out real quick, looking back at the trades as a position player-wise, Todd Frazier. He wasn't doing well earlier in the year. He was kind of supplanted as being the third base / first baseman while Matt Holliday was taking the DH role. And, now it's probably more since he is on the DL, but he's not doing so well either, and which is kind of interesting. I know they needed a guy with experience at the hot corners, but it hasn't been doing so well for them per se since the start of the second half. Well, since he really got there, I believe, like 2 days after the second half started. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just, for him, it's just really different. And then, we can't forget about the pitchers, something that I think you dearly love more than the hitting side like I do, because it's always, I guess hit or miss per se. Got the pun. But you look at this second half registered starting pitchers for the team. You have 9 guys. You have Severino, which he's done well, playing wise and in fantasy baseball, and I only can attest that because I have him on my team. Then you have Masahiro Tanaka. Jordan Montgomery has gotten some outings, and CC Sabathia. Really, those 4 guys have been the workhorses per se. And then your 5th starter, you got to go through Caleb Smith, which he was a guy through 7 innings. Then Sonny Gray, he just had a start, went through 6. Brian Mitchell, 5. Jaime Garcia, a guy that he was traded to the Twins before, but then
9 days later traded to the Yankees.
And then you got Luis Cessna. The 5th starter is looking,
like a revolving door.
Yes, and it doesn't help that not only that your 5th starter is a revolving door, but you have CC Sabathia. Not saying that he's the 5th starter or anything, but going through this list as the 4th, he has a 4.81 ERA, a 5.83, 5.89 FIP, if I can actually say it. I want to say Babbitt, but Fabbit. There you go. And then Jordan Montgomery, another guy that has a pure 5.55 ERA, but his FIP is looking pretty good.
But what's saving them is their bullpen. When just running down the line, Dylan Patansis, 0.71 ERA. Adam Warren, 164 ERA. Aroldis Chapman, 169 ERA. David Robinson, 180. Brian Mitchell at a 1. Tommy Cannell at a 208.
Mm-hmm.
That's 7 relief pitchers with sub-2 ERAs in the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So the Yankees, if they can get better starting pitching, they'll be able to maintain.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I think that's kind of where they're at the moment, like we kind of brought up with Boston a little bit earlier in the show, that they got to, do we have to worry about Boston really holding their position, or there's going to be some drop? And really, I think it's easy to say that the Yankees should just hold their position and just play as the wild card. Yeah, if they get the division spot, that's perfectly fine. But as for that, I don't think it is something that they need to really worry about. And the team that's just right behind them, your team, the team that you love the most, the Kansas City Royals, have, we've talked about this many of times where they have tried to. They were not that good, but then they finally, got out of that shell and started to explode. And
Yeah.
explain to me what has been happening with this team, since you're more in tune with them than I am.
Starting pitching. The thing that had been somewhat at least average and mediocre for them in the first half of the season has starting to take kind of a downward turn. Jason Vargas was an all-star with us just over a 2 ERA with a 2.03 going to the all-star game. His last 23 innings, 694.
Mm-hmm.
Ian Kennedy, 608. Mike, and then starting pitching, Danny Duffy's maintaining well with a 278. Jason Hamill with a 377. Trevor Cahill, a guy they went out and got, 727 ERA with the team. So their starting pitching has not been pitching well. Then you would think maybe their bullpen's doing a little better. Not so much the case. Mike Minor has a 540. Nefertiti Feliz has a 409. And then Joakim Soria, he's still pitching well with a 253. Peter Moylan has been lights out with 9 innings and a 2/3 pitch with a 293. Kelvin Herrera is doing all right with 9 innings and a 3 ERA. Kevin McCarthy has 7 innings pitched and a 129. And then the two guys they traded for the Padres as well, Brandon Maurer and Ryan Butcher, have a 540 and a 675 ERA.
And go ahead real quick.
And they've had Duffy, Hamill, Kennedy, Vargas all make starts, but they've also had Travis Wood, Trevor Cahill, and Jacob Junis make a start as well.
And could you say that from what you've seen or what you've heard, could you say that Trevor Cahill has done what he's supposed to do after that trade that they did with the San Diego Padres?
He starts tonight.
Okay.
This will be his third start.
Okay.
So I don't want to jump the gun yet.
That's understandable. And,
let him get 3 or 4 starts underneath his belt. Then I will be more close to make a judgment.
Okay. Good.
But his first 2 starts, no, they haven't been good. But hopefully tonight he can turn a corner. And we did, out of a doubleheader they had on Sunday, they did get a really good start out of Jacob Junis. He went 8 innings, 1 run.
Yeah, that's really good for a guy that,
has been making spot starts all year for him.
And especially, pretty much. And go ahead.
You can't really say too much else about their hitting either. Salvador Perez, I did just get an update from their beat writer. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks.
And that's been kind of, from watching last night's game, I know that
that's
we keep
kind
on
of what
bringing
hurt their offense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what led Ned Yost to sit Alex Gordon. And I can kind of run down through it. Their best hitter in the last 30 days has been Whit Merrifield. He's been one of their consistent players all year. He's hitting 324 with 6 home runs. That's tied with Eric Hosmer for home runs for the month. Hosmer is hitting 296. Kane is hitting 312. Moustakas is hitting 286. Jorge Bonifacio is hitting 266. A guy went out and traded for, Cabrera, is hitting 333. And you could tell Perez was a little hurt because he's only hitting 229, but his backup in 28 at-bats in 286.
Yeah, Drew Patera,
Yep, and Brandon Moss has turned a corner as well. He's had 5 home runs. He's hitting 250 in the last 30 days. So the team has really struggled on the pitching side, and it seems kind of flip-flop because for the first half of the season it was the offense, not the pitching. Now it's kind of flipping the other way where the pitching is struggling, but the bats aren't. And you can't argue the last 2 games the bats have struggled, but that happens for stretches.
Yeah, and I know that I was just going to say I know that we've kind of been watching this key matchup between, our favorite teams because it's been kind of every game has been kind of whether the Cardinals or the Royals will supplant themselves as a team that will make it to the playoffs or wild card or not make it to the playoffs. And it seemed like each pitch last night was just as intense as any other pitch into the World Series.
Yeah, both of these teams have something left to prove.
Yeah.
So what's really going to lead the Royals to fruition to the playoffs is getting their pitching underneath control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just seems like that. And I was going to say real quick that I was looking at Peter Moylan, and he has that nice 0.93 ERA.
And because he faces nothing but right-handers, and he has a slider that's deadly, down and away. It starts in the zone, breaks out of the zone, and it has everyone having their booty out, missing it.
And the one thing about it is like, all right, this guy has to be like ridiculous. You already said that he's a righty specialist pretty much, and you're expecting really high strikeout per 9. No, it's a 1.86 strikeouts per 9. So
nope, he just gets ground balls all of the time.
And I mean hey, whatever gets it done, and especially
exactly.
And just to say that real quick, he is the second highest on the team with a 64.5 ground ball percentage. And now let's go to the next team, shall we? And that will be the Seattle Mariners. And the Mariners, they've always been a good team per se. They got Robinson Cano. They got Nelson Cruz. Kyle Seager. They got a lot of good talent, but they haven't really done much. And there's always been problems with this or that. They always say it's next year, yada, yada, yada. But now, is it coming to fruition, Phil? Do you see that happening?
I know Felix Hernandez is on the DL, right?
Mm-hmm. He is on the DL for, I believe, 3 to 4 weeks. And
so they're going to have to rely on guys. James Paxton has been lights out for them the last 30 days. 32 innings pitched, has 11.53 K per 9, so that's 33.3% of the time he's getting a strikeout. And then Felix Hernandez was pitching well. He had a 23 innings, 391, and even 9 K per 9.
Hold on one second. I just want to say that I am totally wrong because I thought I read that he had like a 3 or 4 week injury. No, it's more of a weak injury. I don't know where I got my numbers, but
and then
dumb me. But yeah, keep on
Gallardo,
going.
A guy that's typically had control problems, has a low strikeout rate with 4.32 K per 9, but he has left on base of 92.4% and 3.78 ERA. And then Andrew Moore, another pitcher that's registered starting, 8.04 ERA, 15 innings pitched. And then Emerso Ramirez, guy that started one of the doubleheaders against the Royals, 8 1/3 innings, 7.56. Then they got Sam Gavigiero. Oh, man, that's Italian. I don't even know.
Hold on. Let me see.
But
yeah, you pretty much got it.
And he had 6 innings, 7.50 ERA. They had another guy start, Marco Gonzalez, 4 innings, 11.25 ERA.
And a former Cardinal at that, but of course we've talked about that last week. But keep on going.
But they're getting good pitching out of their bullpen. Pagan is has an 84.3% left on base. Edwin Diaz, a 1.3 ERA, 1.6 FIP, 13.15 K per 9. Nick Vincent, 208, 13 innings pitched, 291 FIP, and a 22% strikeout rate. And then Tony Zick, 9 1/3 innings pitched, 1.93 ERA, 85.7% left on base, 9.64 K per 9, and 325 FIP. So they're getting good back end of the bullpen pitching is what they needed. And then if you look at their hitting, let me pull that up.
I can get the hitting real quick.
All right.
We have really right now the top billing guy is Kyle Seager with a 293 batting average, 375 on base percentage, and a 598 slugging percentage. And I'm guessing that's over 900 or to 1,000 on the OPS charts. And this guy, we like guys that don't strike out very often. And this guy, 16.3% strikeout rate. But then you look at the other big guys that we did talk about. Nelson Cruz, Robinson Cano. Who was the other one that you brought up you brought up another one.
Kyle Seager.
Kyle Seager. But that was but that's the only guy out of those three guys that have done well, through the most part of the year for the Seattle Mariners. Nelson Cruz and Robinson Cano haven't done much since the second half started. They both have a 247 batting average. They both have 330 and a 352 on base percentage. Nelson Cruz has a better slugging percentage at a 506, but Robinson Cano hasn't done much. And you have Nelson Cruz hitting 7 home runs.
Yep. And they went out and signed a guy traded for Gerard Dyson. They expected more out of him because this is his first year starting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the year he's hitting 230, 240. In the last 30 days he's only hitting 206, and he has an 18 WRC plus.
Mm-hmm.
He's the type of guy you want on the base pass often,
mm-hmm.
and it's just not happening.
Yeah, and that's kind of the other thing too. Looking at most of these guys that you would say that have registered the most to the club, you have only Nelson Cruz and Kyle Seager with really, really positive WRC plus.
Yeah.
And what the other guys are either just below it or just 1% above. You could talk about Leonis Martin if you want. Right now, he's only had 33 plate appearances, has a nice 303 batting average, and on base percentage. His slugging is a 576, so you're going to get good numbers, but he hasn't been at the plate as much. Like I said, 33 plate appearances compared to, it would be Gene Segura, if I'm correct. Isn't he? No, he's shortstop. I had to think about it for a moment. Nelson Cruz, Ben Gamel, and Gerard Dyson. Those guys have at least. Nelson Cruz has 105 plate appearances. Ben Gamel with 100, and Gerard Dyson with 67. And they just haven't done really much about it. So, I mean, I don't know what else you could say about that.
If the Mariners are going to maintain or get a chance in, they're going to have to get better hitting.
Yes. And
they did take 2 out of 3 from the Royals because they had better pitching,
mm-hmm.
and they had better hitting.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can maintain that and get better, then
mm-hmm.
they can make a run for that wild card spot, no problem.
Yeah, and especially getting Yonder Alonso for them. He hasn't done much yet, but I think something will turn around for Alonso and for the Mariners. And the fourth team that is considered to be part of the 2-team wild card at the moment, the Tampa Bay Rays. And really, if you look at the Rays, they've just been, even though they've been well, let's not, I'm not saying this as, they're playing horribly. They've been beaten up. If you look at it,
look at their starting pitching ERA for the last 30 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you got Alex Cobb at 398, Chris Archer at 319,
mm-hmm.
Jacob Ferrara,
yes,
372, Blake Snell 531,
mm-hmm.
Austin Pruitt 312, Jake Odorizzi 327.
Mm-hmm.
So the guys with sub-4 ERAs are good,
mm-hmm.
but you don't have that one guy that's just locked down every single start.
Even though that should be Chris Archer, and he has not been doing that.
And then you're getting good bullpen pitching out of Tommy Hunter, Alex Comey,
mm-hmm.
and it's really about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
you got 2 guys in your bullpen that are pitching well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Brad Boxberger has a 4.40 ERA. Chase Whitley has a 4.50.
Mm-hmm.
Sergio Romo, a guy they traded for, is hitting 3.52. ERA of 3.52. They got 2 guys that have 5 registered innings with 0 ERAs, but in 30 days, that's not very many. That's not very many games.
Yeah, that's not very many to really say, are these guys going to do well or do not? I mean, you're talking about Steve Cishek and Erasmo Ramirez.
Yeah,
guys,
and there's a reason why they only have 5 innings pitched.
Yeah, and even though they do have, an incredible ERA, but it's the innings pitched that is kind of like
gives you more of a sign of what's going on.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're not used often.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's a reason why they're using guys like Chase Whitley, Brad Boxberger, Alex Comey, and Tommy Hunter, and Sergio Romo more.
Yes, exactly.
And then they went out and they got a guy in Lucas Duda.
Mm-hmm.
And in his 32 at-bats for him, he's hitting .313 with 3 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a good pickup for him.
Yeah, and it just seems to me that it's been kind of almost a quote-unquote swing and a miss, because if you look at it real closely, you have Evan Longoria since the start of the second half at a .305 batting average, .343 on base, and a .558 slugging. But then you have guys like Corey Dickerson, a really good guy. He was
All-star.
pounding all-star. He was pounding the ball earlier this year. Now he has a .233 batting average, but he doesn't have the high home run mark like Steven Souza, which Steven Souza has a .250 batting average, .365 slugging, on base, and a .569 slugging with a .275 BABIP. That's where it's
and
kind
a
of
148 WRC plus with 7 home runs, so you can take that .250 average.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
because he's a run producer for you. On the other hand, when you got guys like Logan Morrison, who has 4 home runs and hitting .213, you don't want that.
Yes,
I'd rather the dude have
go ahead.
2 home runs and hit .280.
Yeah, because what's going on, it's more of a crapshoot that you're going to get a home run than anything else. Out of the 89 plate appearances, Phil goes to at-bats, I go to plate appearances. There's not much. It just, I think yours.
The difference is the plate appearance. You don't get an at-bat count when you get a walk.
Yeah, but if you do the math, out of the 89 plate appearances that he has, only 4 of those are home runs. So what's even the point of putting him in when you have literally slim than 5% chance of him getting a home run? And even though he has a 9 RBI, you could say that about Brad Miller, but he has a 176 batting average. So it's just like, why is he in there? Even though he does put a body in a position, I think they could go with somebody else. That's just me.
for the Rays to be able to do it, everything needs to come full circle for them.
Yes, exactly.
They need to start hitting league average and pitching league average, because if they do that, then they can maintain. They can if they're hitting average everything, not even above average for pitching or hitting, they can keep their wild card spot and get into the playoffs.
And, the one thing that they kind of just have to, watch out for, I was about to bring it up earlier, how they've just been getting hit a lot. It's just not only that the pitchers aren't pitching well, they're also kind of those injuries going on. They had Kevin Kiermaier and Matt Duffy both on the 60-day DL. But the good thing is Kevin Kiermaier is coming back. Then they had Matt Andrizi injured. He'll be on the 60-day DL. He'll be out for a while. Then Alex Cobb, he got turf toe a couple days ago. He's out for 10 days. Ethan Evaldi, if I can ever get that correctly, he was injured earlier in the year, but he was one of the young guys that was going to do well for them. And then Jake Odorizzi, he has done well in his spots, but he's also, he had a lower back strain coming into August. Now he's in rehab. And maybe this might be the chance where, even though we gave those guys their numbers, their stats, we're also seeing the possibility of the future of the Rays when every one of those guys gets back, especially with Odorizzi, Alex Cobb, and Matt Andrizi. So it's going to be up in the air. And I know that I don't think we had Matt Andrizi's numbers per se because he hasn't started in the second half, but he's done, decently well where the numbers are to the same. And I think that's going to be, the difference maker between how they're going to get into the playoffs and how they're not going to get into the playoffs. So, I don't know what else to say about the Rays. They're kind of the odd man out, starting from the year into pretty much the end of the year.
Yeah, and like I brought up, they like you like. I really like how you put the odd man out because of the other top 3 teams, they're starting to struggle on both ends of the ball. As you know, we talked about the Mariners. They're struggling at hitting, but they're pitching well. Royals are hitting well, but their pitching is struggling. The Yankees hitting is struggling, and the pitching is doing well. Rays struggling on both ends.
And but they not only as an odd man out by that means, but they're also the odd man out as we weren't expecting this at all. I mean, yeah, we brought up with the Yankees, but the Yankees, they're the Yankees. They always have something happening. I mean, hell, back in, I believe it was 15, where they faced the Astros in the wild card game, I thought they weren't going to make it to the playoffs at all, even though I kind of hate the wild card being called a playoff game, but that's just me. That's a whole different story. But it's just that where a team that a team that I thought was going to be up there, the Baltimore Orioles, they have surged back. If you look at the team, look at their starting pitching, if everything wants to load up, here we go. They recently traded for a guy, Jeremy Hellickson, which he has a 2.08 ERA. Dylan Bundy has done decently well for him, 3.42 ERA. Kevin Gossman, 2.93. He's done well for them. And they got high strikeout numbers. I mean, Kevin Gossman with a 10.86, Dylan Bundy with a 7.86. It's just been really good for this team. But then those are 3 guys. What about your so-called your fourth and fifth, and sometimes the quote-unquote spot starters out of this? And they haven't been doing well. Ubaldo Jimenez, 5.20 ERA. Wade Miley, 7.36 ERA. Chris Tillman, he has a 8.66 ERA. And these guys, if I remember correctly, they're not injured. So that's where it's just kind of been, iffy of sorts in a way.
Yeah. And really, even if you look at their bullpen too, they had a chance to beef up something by trading Zach Britton. Because he's been hurt for most of the year. So they had the chance to add maybe a hitter or a couple bullpen pieces that could combine to be Zach Britton. And they didn't. So you're kind of, the concern is they didn't make any moves. So what's really going to help them? The team that's been kind of all year is all of a sudden going to turn it around the last 2 months. And like you said, like you brought up, their starting pitching is struggling. Their bullpen is not much better. They're getting good innings out of Miguel Castro and Richard Bleer. But besides that, Michael Givens has a 3.18. Donnie Hart has a 3.48. Darren O'Day has a 6.10. Zach Britton has a 3.86. Brad Batch has a 2.79.
And Britton has been injured a little bit. And, besides, really looking at that, because, I mean, you can always look at teams one way or another or at one specific spots. But if you look at if you try to look at how it's all done, they don't have really strikeout guys. It's like we brought up with Peter Moylan. Ground ball is the way to go. But, you talk about Miguel Castro, 376 K per 9, but he has a 45.1 ground ball percentage. Doesn't really, quote unquote, fly with me. So I mean,
right.
So it's just with that, they've been getting help from a couple of guys, but you also have to look at the batting, and that's where it's been kind of the spot for them. Adam Jones, 280. Manny Machado, 343. Jonathan Scope, 327. But then after that, you have Wellington Castillo at a 396. Seth Smith at a 341. But then Caleb Joseph, which I totally forget about because I'm ready for Chase Sisco to be the catcher for the Baltimore Orioles, but he has a 326. But everybody else, I mean, those three guys that I just named aren't your everyday plate appearance guys. I mean, Wellington Cancio has only been in 14 games. Seth Smith, 15. Caleb Joseph, 13. While you look at Adams, Machado, and Scope, 25 games for each other. And then Trey Mancini, he's been kind of the guy that's been hitting well. He's getting the RBIs in, but 239 batting average. It's kind of like what's been going on with Alex Gordon, and just hasn't done really well for them. But then you got to look at the team that's on the other side, with the Royals, is the Minnesota Twins, the team that was leading to, at least 1/3 of the season, and then everything started to come back down a little bit. And they've been kind of been through some disabled list stuff. Phil Hughes, a starting pitcher for them, I believe he was going to be the second or third in the rotation. He's been injured, and a couple
Urban
other guys.
Santana has lost his whatever career year he was kind of having, where all their starting pitchers have above 4 ERAs right now in the last 30 days. Not for the season, but for the last 30 days. So they're not getting good starting pitching. Their relief pitching they're getting good out of Matt Beasel, but they did trade Brandon Kitzler, and they're just not getting good pitching. There's really not a whole lot else you can really say about it.
Yeah, and you're kind of right. I mean, you do have Trevor Hildenberger with the 3.09 ERA, but lower is better, and especially for relief pitchers, being that 1 inning or 2 inning guy, and especially with him having a 77.6 left on base percentage, is not really the way to go. Yeah.
And it kind of goes along with their hitting too. They've kind of lost their muster. They got Miguel Sano is only hitting 240 with 4 home runs. Brian Dozier is hitting a lot better than he was the first half of the season with 8 home runs and a 274 average. Eddie Rosario is coming around in the last 30 days hitting 297. And all these guys, except for Sano, have a positive WRC plus above 100. Jorge Polanco's hitting 282. Ahir Adriana is hitting 286. So you got 4 guys that are hitting for league average or better. But Joe Mauer is hitting 210. Jason Castro's hitting 236. Robbie Grossman's hitting 203. Eduardo Escobar's hitting 203. Max Kepler's hitting 192. Zach Granite is hitting 267. So for the Twins, it's the pitching and the hittings that's falling apart at the wrong time.
And yeah, like you said, Rosario and Adrian Zia has been doing well. Jorge Polanco has done well, but those 2 guys, like I named, don't have those plate appearances. And Dozier, the guy that was being talked about being traded earlier this year for, to be the second baseman of the Dodgers, really hasn't panned out as much. So, I mean, that's just me looking at it. And like you said, everybody else is just being subpar when they really need to really step up and try to make that playoff push for this year, or at least if they want to rest them, try to go for it next year. And that's kind of been kind of it for really the wild card. If you got to have everything with you or not, because if you don't, then you won't make it anywhere, as seen by like I brought up earlier with the 2011 Boston Red Sox. Yeah, still they had that 99.7% chance of making it, but the other, the 0.3 really came out, and that's what happens. And, another surprise team that I'm still surprised to this day is really the Los Angeles Angels. And if you look at it real quick, they have some guys injured. They have Alex Meyer, Garrett Richards, Matt Shoemaker, which he just got into, I believe he went to surgery earlier this week. Andrew Bailey was another guy. Houston Street was another guy, which is really interesting to see those guys get in there. I guess they're really throwing it out. And if you really do look at their numbers, you have Meyer, going that one game, 7 innings. But that's it. You have, Ricky Nolasco, he has a 5.20 ERA. J.C. Ramirez has a 3.48. Parker Bridwell has a 2.76. But there's been but it's been mostly guys to be spot starters. Like I said, Alex Meyer was one of those guys. Jesse Chavez, he's that fifth in the rotation. He has an 8.78. So I think just really getting those spot starts for them has really done quite a number for the Los Angeles Angels. And what also doesn't help either is everybody else is kind of, has meddling ERAs. I mean, Blake Parker, Urasimo Pettit have great ERAs, 2.53 and 1.80 respectively. But then Cam Brassodian has an 8. Kenyon Middleton has a 5. Bud Norris, a guy that's been pretty much part of the conversation for a while about trades and all that stuff, has a 12.98. And, there's other guys that have 0 ERAs, but not really the amount of innings pitched that we want to see from them. Would you say, Phil?
No, not at all. Oh, I guess, yes, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not the type of innings you want to see pitched.
Mm-hmm. And especially with those ERAs.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That. And, really also looking at it, too, you got to look on the other side of the ball. And that's where it's been kind of the good thing for them. Andrelton Simmons, Ben Revere, Mike Trout, Caleb
Trout getting back from injury and literally not taking a step back.
Yes, and Caleb Cowart has all those guys that I name, and CJ Crone all have batting averages over 300.
And that's been a part of their resurgence.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're in our discussions, because they're able to make up on offense what their pitching isn't doing.
Mm-hmm.
Minus Albert Pujols, who at some point will be set.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen one of these days.
You can't have a guy hitting 172 in your lineup, striking out 20% of the time.
Mm-hmm. And especially, it kind of brings up with, I believe it was Logan Morris, that you can't expect him to hit, it's going like a crapshoot for hitting home runs. He only has 4 home runs in the 90 plate appearances that he has. There's really no reason for him to be there, in a sense.
Yeah, it's really not. And like you said, you brought up guys that are doing well. Trout, Simmons.
Ben Revere. He's been doing well.
Ben Revere and Colby Cowart.
Yeah, Caleb Cowart.
Cowart, yeah. But Cowart, thing is, he only has 36 at-bats, though.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit more than one a day.
Mm-hmm.
But no, if the Angels are going to do it, they're going to need a lot more than what they're getting now.
Yeah, and I think those are, really besides, all the teams that we named, including the Tampa Bay Rays, the Orioles, and the Twins, those 4 teams are kind of the guys, are on the outside looking in, because even though Tampa Bay is tied with Seattle and Kansas City for the second spot, I just think the Rays, Baltimore, Minnesota, and the Angels are the guys that are just looking from the outside looking in. And they're going to be wondering how one thing could lead to another at the end of the year, and just wondering how did they not get into the playoffs.
Yep.
And I mean, that's really pretty much it out of it, you know? If you really look at it, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's going to be down to the wire, but of course, really at the end of it all, I think it's going to come down to the three that we talked about first: Yankees, Royals, and Mariners, to the very end, at least.
Yep. And I think unless the Royals get it together, I think it's going to be the Yankees and the Mariners.
And there is that possibility. And yeah, I mean, Yankees,
maybe it's because I'm just a little bit old manish right now, and the Royals have just been playing terrible these last two series, and it could be just that. But the thing is, you can't have two bad series back to back when you're in this kind of race.
Yes, exactly, and that's where it's kind of been like that. But I think that's everything that we have to say for this podcast, because it's getting down to the moments where it's going to be, you're either going to be at the end of it all going to have a joyous moment, you know, on October 1st or September 30th, whatever day is the last day of the season, or be in pain, be in shock in a way, because they didn't do one more thing, or that some things didn't go their ways and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it for the MLBeers podcast for this week. I mean, if you want to contact us, we have Twitters, but of course we got to talk about our podcast first. We have a Twitter at MLBeers Podcast. We have a Facebook, MLBeers Podcast. Instagram, MLBeers Podcast. We don't have a Snapchat. I just thought about Snapchat right then and there. We don't have a Snapchat. That's kind of a good thing. But we do have an email account at the majorleaguebeers.gmail.com. And then we try to do so much. We have a tap-in account, which if you don't know what tap-in is, it is a beer, would you say a beer list social media that if you taste the beer,
essentially, and you can check in, rate your beer, and leave a small description.
Which is always fun. And don't forget to take a picture of your beer, because it's always interesting to see where people were having their beers or what were they having it in. Mostly for me, it's in a tulip glass. Tonight it wasn't. It was in just the good old bottle of the beer. Then I'm trying to think of anything else that that they can contact us. Oh yeah, of course we brought up our Twitters, but we didn't really say our handles. Mine is the real AWS13, and Phil, what is yours?
At Philco816.
And of course, we are part of the, if you didn't hear it before the podcast, we are part of the Tangent Bound Network, which has a multitude of podcasts ranging from one genre to another. I believe one genre I've been seeing a lot lately has been part of the, quote-unquote pop culture or nerd culture, depending on whatever you want to say about it. And then you have some friends on a podcast, the Salty Language podcast, if I'm correct.
Yes, go check those two guys out, Brian and Tony. Really funny and a great podcast to listen to. And
of course, that's gonna be it here. You can hear us on iTunes and subscribe to iTunes. You can hear us on SoundCloud. Subscribe to our SoundCloud account. We are in TuneIn, and we're about to get to another one, but I'll have to make sure that we have to do the right parameters and everything else. So it is here, folks. We're getting down to the dog days of summer, almost to the we're getting that taste of fall baseball, where everything will be counted for and we'll be looking at everything almost in a microscopic lens. I wanted to say microphones lens for some odd reason, but of course that's me talking into a microphone. But anyways, that will do it here, folks, for the MLBeers podcast with your hosts Andrew Sherman and Philip Corwin. We wish you a very good day, And of course, our motto, our creed, our saying, win or lose, there is always booze.